Good evening. Call the regular council meeting to order. Recommendation that the regular meeting of June 28, 2021 be suspended and that the committee of the whole meeting be convened. Moved by Councillor 80, seconded by Councillor Reinhala. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Call tonight's committee of the whole meeting to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting of June 28, 2021 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, first up we have Caitlin Birdsall from the North Coast Ecology Center Society to do a small presentation. Welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Thanks so much for allowing me to come to speak to you today. My name's Caitlin Birdsall, for those of you I haven't met before. I'm here as the board chair for the North Coast Ecology Center Society, and you can move that forward one there, Rosa. Thanks. For those of you that aren't familiar with our society, we're fairly new. We became a registered society in Prince Rupert here in 2018. And our vision really is to create a permanent interpretive center here in Prince Rupert that would highlight the region's ecological richness. We also recognize very much that it is paramount that we create relationships, participation, and collaboration with local Tsimshian nations, because you cannot talk about local ecology without referencing and acknowledging all the traditional ecological knowledge that there is in this region as well. The next slide. So our mission of this center really would be to use exhibits and programs on marine and terrestrial species to really inspire a sense of awe and respect for this region, its wildlife, and its culture as well. So this would be kind of part mini aquarium, we see it, part nature house. It would have programs that happen there and also out in the community, and likely would be staffed seasonally from spring through to fall each year. Now, of course, we are not alone. Our board is 9 members, many of whom I'm sure you know, and most of us are environmental professionals that work for other organizations or nations in town within sort of the biological or environmental fields. Now, we really think that this would be a huge benefit for Prince Rupert. We think that there are 3 kind of main things that an ecology center would create. First of all, we really think it would be a connection point for residents to learn about nature. We also really think it would be a way for us to really steward environmental stewardship in this region as well. We think it really aligns well with the Redesign Rupert process, as it would activate and revitalize the waterfront. If we are part mini aquarium, we have to be on the waterfront, and as we all know, that is a limited real estate, so we would be looking at using something that's down there that perhaps needs a new lease on life. We also think that this really would fit well with regional economic development as well, by providing sort of a tourist sort of a draw to this region and really make Prince Rupert sort of this hub of cool environmental things happening in our region. Now, to date, we have sort of done 2 streams. One with our educational mission. We've done a few different things that you may not be familiar with being done by our society. So if you visited the North Coast Whale Festival in 2018 and 2019, that was done under the umbrella of the North Coast Ecology Center Society, with many other organizations in town as well. This past year, we partnered with Katata and Triton Environmental to do a live dive program with several schools, and using the marine salvage happening off Ridley Island and the divers there to bring the underwater world into the classroom. We also hosted a lecture series this winter, 4 different lectures via Zoom during these COVID times that were extremely well attended and really highlighted different sort of unique things about our ecology, from Oolakan to the grizzly bears of the Kootsmatine to that marine salvage work happening in our area as well. On the development side of things, in bringing this idea to life, we have done a couple other events. Councillor 80 attended our community workshop in 2019. That was really our launch to begin discussing this idea with different stakeholders and community members. We did undertake a preliminary design process with a consultant, just to have a picture when we go to speak to different people of what this potentially could look like, but of course lots of opportunity for feedback and change and development. development. We did a community survey this past fall. We had 350 respondents from our community tell us what they thought about the idea, and we are undergoing sort of a feasibility study as well. Now, on the feasibility side of things, and you can flip that forward for me, Rosa, this summer I'm here to tell you about something really exciting we're doing. We are launching a pop-up ecology center in Cow Bay. We are using a portion of the Northland Cruise Terminal. As we all know, cruise season is canceled this year, and we thought we'd put a little silver lining on that by using that space to create something fun for our community. It will happen for 4 weeks, 5 days a week, from July 21st until August 15th, and we do have our COVID plan approved by Northern Health, so we'll be doing it in a way that is safe, and we'll be using the portion of the cruise terminal that is mostly open air, that just has a roof on it. So highlights of our pop-up mini ecology center. So we will have some saltwater tanks with live marine invertebrates and fish, pending our DFO approval of a permit, which we feel pretty confident hopefully we will get. We hope to have a touch tank that we'll use at times to really allow kids and adults to get their hands in the saltwater. We'll have some static displays like microscopes, a big humpback skull, other things like that. And we do have trained educators. Thanks to the Canada Summer Jobs Program, we were able to hire 3 educators, two whom are local Prince Rupertites, to act as educators in this process. And on busy weekends, we will activate that plaza outside of the cruise terminal with some extra events, since our COVID numbers are small through that space, so that we can kind of keep people busy and engaged if they do have to wait as well. So the goal of this pop-up sort of short-term temporary exhibit is to bring that nature education to the North Coast, to provide that silver lining and a new experience after a really difficult 18 months in which we, of course, have had to cancel so many different things. And for our benefit as well, to understand this feasibility of opening an ecology center. Do people come? What do they react to? And we will have an exit survey and be collecting stats as we run this, as we go along, to help us better understand that portion of it. So I just wanted to highlight, we do have some great sponsors that have come along. Of course, the Prince Rupert Port Authority has really facilitated us using that space. We have a wonderful office sponsor in Triton Environmental who has given us other shelter to use this summer for free. We're really grateful. And then several industry sponsors that have come in financially to help create this pop-up center. And I actually just got word today that DP has just sent a check as well. So they're not on that slide because I sent it on Friday, but they will be there as well. So we're really grateful to them. So I just wanted to come today to tell you about our society, tell you about what we're hoping to do, but mostly to invite you to come down and join us this summer to see what we're about, to engage in the idea of bringing an ecology center to Prince Rupert, and to invite you as we move forward in understanding how this could work, to have the city participate as well. So thanks so much for your time.
Great, thank you. Any questions from council? Councilor Adie.
Yeah, just I'm glad you put 2019 up there, because I was trying to remember how long ago it was, and I remember being struck at that time with what was a pretty broadly attended brainstorming session that was really characterized by a really positive. There was a really positive feeling in the room. It was aspirational at the time, so I'm pleased to see that it's still on track and moving. And what I'm hearing is that this pop-up center represents a kind of a litmus test of sorts. You know, and as a fan of the concept overall, I hope it produces a positive result for you. So my question then, if you see a positive public response, if you see, you know, feasibility in a positive sense, what then do you see as the sort of big ticket checklist things that have to happen to get to a permanent center?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So absolutely, you're right. This is a litmus test. And we do know from other jurisdictions in British Columbia that these ideas can go really, really well, or they can struggle, just depending on whether you hit the right note with your community. And we want to make sure that we do that. So that's part of this. So our next kind of big steps, if it's positive, if we really feel like this has shown feasibility, of course, will be to best engage with local nations. And we don't want to move forward with without really having those relationships solidified. And we have started down that road, but we're still in that process of understanding how that might work. So that's a really big one for us, working with the Aboriginal Education Department as well in the school district, Metlakatla, Lac Palams, and some of the other Coast Tsimshian nations as well. After that, of course, funding is always the big ticket. And we do hope that for the most part, we can be self-sustaining once we're operational. But of course, we do need a lot of capital funding. So we will be looking probably at some of those bigger funding pots, like the Community Investment Fund put forth by the Prince Rupert Port Authority. But definitely that sort of big fundraising piece will be next. And then securing and finding the right place for us on the waterfront. Some of you may be aware that we've been talking with Paul and looking at potentially a corner of the Camfisco warehouse as potential use. But I'm sure for those of you who have been in that warehouse also know it's a shell, and it would definitely require a lot of infrastructure to be put into there to make it into this kind of center. So just ensuring that that is the right space, and also exploring all avenues. So we have been kind of doing that. We know that real estate is tight on the waterfront, but also looking at, could something floating potentially also be a possibility. So, yeah, those would be, I say, the three big ones next. Yeah.
Well, I wish you well with all of it.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Cunningham, then Councillor Manhala.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. You basically answered most of the questions I was going to ask, because I would love to see a permanent thing like this. We're a marine-based still town, and we're lacking in a lot of this, and it would be really good to see something like this full-time and educating younger kids. You could have school programs and everything. It would be something, would be a great boost to the city as well as a tourist attraction destination point later on. So yeah, it's great, and good luck, and if I can help in any way, let me know.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate the encouragement. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. Learn a lot about the society. You mentioned you are working with the tourist destination. So, like, how tourists fit into this? Like, are you talking with the Prince Rupert tourism or BC tourism or cruise ships? How they fit into this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to date, we have mostly been talking to Tourism Prince Rupert, both Scott Farwell, and Kaylee before she took her maternity leave, and talking about how this might fit into their strategic plan that they've been developing recently. So some ideas that have been discussed is I know that they are looking at potentially festivals as well, and is there a way that we could work together to bring that to light? So a really, we have so many unique things here. Can we create a really engaging wildlife festival on the North Coast that we would help partner with them to do? They've been giving us advice about locations and how far do tourists walk, and what kind of signage is that a part of. So mostly with Tourism Prince Rupert, and then through them tapping into Destination BC, probably a little bit further down the line when we're a little more cemented. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Councillor Nish.
Thank you for your presentation, and I look forward to the summer and seeing your pop up, and and hopefully this all works out to a permanent location, because I think from city's perspective, I'm sure we would be all supportive and on board to seeing something like this. Anything that you can add like this in the community is obviously a help, and I think we're probably, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I'm pretty sure that we're all pretty supportive of seeing something like this happen. And good luck.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, we will look forward and continue to update you guys as this as it moves forward. Hopefully moves forward. Mm-hmm.
One more question.
Quick question. I participated in volunteering at the Well Festival.
Yeah.
And do you have any plans to revive that? Because it was a great little festival.
It was a really great little festival. We I think would be open to it. We sort of struggled a little bit with timing. As some of you may know, we are often visited by the A42 matriline of killer whales in April each year, and we designed the whale festival right at that time, the first year in April, and it was like the first year they didn't show up in my 5 years at the time in Prince Rupert, because that's how it always works.
Totally.
So then we moved it to May as sort of a like welcome back humpback whales. But a lot of us obviously are doing this as volunteers, and because we work in the environmental field, often that time is when you're also gearing up for your field season. So it became very busy. So we thought about, maybe this would be something better to move to, say, September, when we still have whales around as well. But then the pandemic hit, and we called it off for obvious reasons, and this year we're focusing on the pop-up. But as we kind of move forward, it may be something that we bring back, and it was a really fun event, and really well received. So I do hope so. We will be using volunteers again for the pop-up. We actually have our volunteer information session tomorrow. So a similar type vibe of using expertise from our community to make this happen.
When is this volunteer session going to be?
It's tomorrow night via Zoom. If you're interested, I can send you an invite.
Sure.
So it's just to let people know what's going on, and then we'll have 2 training sessions a little bit closer to the date that we open in July.
Yeah, because there's probably lots of people out there that might be listening, or Northern View might pick up on it.
Absolutely. We will pop up. There is some information on our sort of social media channels, and we'll pop it up again so people can connect if they're interested. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to say, thank you for all the work you guys are doing for the community. I started an organization in town between 2010 and 2014. I know just how hard it is to get the Articles of Corporation and the Constitution and all your bylaws and policies in order, and raising funds and starting the events and doing all of it by yourselves as volunteers. So totally commend you guys for the process that you've been in. You're doing it in the right methodology, I would say, to get something to actually come to fruition in the community. And as Councillor Nish said, I think that most of the council here, if not all of us, would definitely be on board with supporting you with the final endeavor, whether that's space or our advocacy or our connections within different various organizations for funding or property owners or whatever it needs to be. But definitely see this becoming a staple in the community, something I think would be a huge success here. And so we want to continue those conversations as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys so
Thank
much.
you.
Please come see us this summer down at the cruise terminal. And please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any other questions or any other suggestions. Thank you.
Enjoy the weather.
Ah, thanks. Whew. You guys, it's hot in here.
Absolutely. Okay, next we have our corporate administrator with the 2020 annual report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As of 4 p.m. today, we have received no comments or questions with respect to the 2020 annual report. And given that no one is in the room, I'm going to assume there's no public here to speak on it either.
Okay. Well, with that being said, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn to reconvene the regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Skelton-Morvan. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of June 28, 2021 be adopted as presented with the addition of item 5B, which is a report from iPlan, and 5F, which is a letter of support for the NCI MSS. Moved by Councillor Ranhawa, seconded by Councillor 80. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting of June 14, 2021 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Nish. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of June 14, 2021 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ranhawa, seconded by Councillor Nish. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. First up, we have a delegation regarding the Park Avenue project. And I think it is Mr. Daniel McGregor on Zoom who is going to be doing the presentation.
Oh, hello. Hello, it's Daniel McGregor here from BNA. I just logged in on my phone. I'm in rural Saskatchewan, so the internet wasn't working for me very well. So can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. And I'll just follow along. I think Rose has got the presentation up, and then I'll go through that, then happy to answer any questions you might have. So thanks for having me tonight. Okay, let me know when you're ready to go, because I can't see anything except on my phone. First page. Okay, perfect. So yeah, I think as was introduced, looking at, so I know you're all familiar with this project, and for this part, it's a joint OCP amendment and rezoning back to the C3 district for this parcel located along Park Avenue. And this is with the intention, of course, to build this hotel and provide needed accommodations in Prince Rupert. So next slide, please. Okay, yeah, bit of the background here. So it's owned by Parm Sandhu, as you know, is a longtime resident, business owner, investor in Prince Rupert. And it has been quite some time, about a year now, that we've been pursuing a hotel development on the site under the C3 service commercial zone, which it was zoned as when he purchased the parcel. And what we, so from the last council meeting that we were here at, which was in early April, we were instructed to submit the building permit application, which we certainly worked very hard to try to get that in. It was submitted on May 7th, but unfortunately we weren't able to get all of the items that were required for that complete building permit application. So that wasn't able to go through. And then of course the new OCP amendments, the new OCP and new zoning bylaw passed on May 10th, which rezoned the site from C3 to RM2 and designate it for residential, or sorry, from commercial to residential purposes. And just want to note a lot of background work and site works has been done on the site. We've got the geotechnical report recently. We've retained the services of architect, construction manager, surveyor. So yeah, certainly a lot has been going on in the background, which I understand a lot of people are already aware of. Just a little bit on the location and context. So we've got quite a narrow site, which makes it a little bit difficult for site planning, but certainly we've found a way that we think we can make it work. Just under an acre in size, and there is a bit of a cliff back there on the east side of things. And its location, so it's across from the former Anchor Inn Hotel, next door to the PJ's on Park Convenience Store, right along the Trans-Canada Highway or Park Avenue. And it's about halfway between, strategically located between the downtown Midtown area and the ferry terminal. So less than 2 kilometers, so about a 15-minute walking distance from each. Just a little bit of the details. Sorry, I guess I should stop, make sure we're on the right slide, the proposed hotel slides.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so I've just been rushing through here. So we're proposing a 3-story structure, a total of 60 hotel rooms. There would be 20 per floor. We'll have kitchens, lounges, laundry, elevators, all the usual amenities. 66 parking spaces at grade, which you can see below, which obviously exceeds the zoning bylaw requirements, so both number and the dimensions. Obviously have some landscaping, greenery at the front of the site, and it will be modular construction, but will be a permanent building built on the site. And we're going to have it geared towards a wide range of guests to meet that need for accommodations in Prince Rupert. So it'll be travelers, backpackers, which we expect, of course, will probably extend a fair bit in the post-COVID travel boom, but then also workers as well who may be working at the Port of Prince Rupert. So definitely filling that need for accommodations. Next slide. Just about meeting Prince Rupert's needs and how the hotel will do that. So we believe it will definitely be an investment in the city's future, providing those high-quality necessary accommodations to assist with the growing economy post-COVID travel boom. Also, we believe it will help facilitate the city, and especially the Midtown and downtown districts, as they're only about a 10 to 15-minute walk away. So guests of the hotel would certainly utilize those restaurants and shops and services, which would be located nearby. And we've got a bit of location up there. Then on the left and then on the right, you'll see the proposed hotel, which would be modern, attractive building located on that major entranceway into the city and enhancing the streetscape. Slide, please. And just a little bit here on the OCP amendment rezoning, which we're proposing today, hoping for that first and second reading. We certainly support the vision, the overall intent of the OCP and continued revitalization of Prince Rupert, which we believe this hotel will help to accommodate. For the C3 zone, we believe it's the most appropriate zone for the site. along major 4-lane highway leading to the downtown, halfway between the ferry terminal and where it is on those major highways where hotels are best suited. Considering the context, we've got C3 zoned property across the street, C3 zoned property immediately to the south. We believe that it certainly makes the most sense considering that context. And then the RM2 zone that was applied to the site, we believe that for multiple family residential development would certainly be less desirable along a busy highway for families to live. And under that RM2 zone, unfortunately, our vision will remain unrealized. And a little bit, next slide, on the public feedback. So we've received a fantastic and overwhelming amount of support from the public through our public consultation program. From May 29th to date, we've received 34 letters or emails of support, and that was included in your package. And you can see a sample of some that we've got here on the right from the Transition Society, Prince Rupert Indigenous Housing Society. See a lot of community and business support, certainly, for this proposal. And then you see a little bit on the process that we went through to engage the public on what we're doing. And finally, to the last slide here, key points conclusion. So the commercial designation in the OCP that we're proposing in the C3 zone, we believe it makes sense here as it's on the major highway, halfway strategically between the ferry terminal and downtown. The current multifamily development RM2 would be less desirable here. The building that we're proposing, new, modern, high-quality hotel, provide benefits to the city and help to meet that need for accommodations. We've been, quite humbled, I would say, by the overwhelming public support that we received for this project. And to conclude, we look forward to continue to work with City Administration, Council, iPlan, and stakeholders and community groups around there to create this successful development. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to provide any further clarity or answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you very much. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. Any questions from council? Okay, doesn't seem to be any questions at this time. I think you've very much articulated some of the key points that council wanted to hear. I think it's on our agenda tonight for first and second reading, and we'll go along the process, and we're looking forward to hearing more feedback from the community. Good work so far.
Okay, great. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You have a great evening. Enjoy Saskatchewan.
Okay, thanks a lot. You too. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. Okay. Excuse me. Next, we have a report from our corporate administrator regarding the annual report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In light of the fact that we have not received any comments, either to the negative or to the positive with respect to the 2020 annual report, we're seeking a resolution tonight from Council for the approval of the 2020 annual report.
Okay, anybody want to move that? Moved by Councillor Adie, seconded by Councillor Renhowa. Discussion? Other than, for folks who are listening, the annual report is where we put the breadth of the entire city operation and what we do into this report every year. So if there's any questions you're looking for, financial information you're looking for, usually it's in the annual report. And if not, our staff are happy to answer questions, or you can ask questions of council. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, next up, item 5B, we have a report on DP 2112, the development permit with a variance for 1080 3rd Avenue West. Oh. What's that? Oh, you're moving it. Oh, I was going to say, you probably have something to say first about it. Let's not, yeah. You're jumping the gun. Great. I like it. You're eager tonight.
Thank you very much. So this council previously approved an application for the redevelopment of 1080 3rd Avenue West for a transitional housing project. The owner is requesting an amendment to that permit. The owner and the applicant are requesting an amendment to the plans that allow the project to proceed with metal siding as was shown on the draft permit provided. This changes from a fiber cement panel to metal cladding. The drawings that were provided show the new exterior treatment, including alternating the field of colors to add interest in design. The requested amendment is consistent with the development permit guidelines and is recommended for approval. The previously approved DP 2104 would remain in effect as amended by this application should council approve it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Renhowa, seconded by Councillor Moreau. Any discussion on this? Councillor Niche.
As someone who builds things in this town, I love the fact that they're not using hardy board siding and they're going to metal siding. So this is a good thing in my eyes, because I think in the longevity of the building with metal siding on it will make it last a lot longer. So I'm glad that they are actually changing it.
Other comments? Councillor Moreau.
I just have a procedural question. It's okay if you don't have an answer just right at this moment, but it might be something worth following up on. Is I'm wondering, because this amendment is consistent with the development permit guidelines, why it needs to come back to council. Because from my perspective, if we've already granted them the variance, this doesn't materially change, I think, the general aesthetic of the building. Is there a way that we could save these applicants a couple of weeks of waiting time for council meetings? Is there a way that we could delegate this to staff in our development procedures?
I could certainly check with that. The reason it did have to come to council this evening is because the initial development permit did specify the fiber board. So in the interest of transparency, we needed to bring it back to advise that council had approved it as fiber board, and now it's metal cladding.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Looking forward to seeing this project get moving forward. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next, we have a report from DPs 2109 for Drake Crescent.
Thank you very much. An application was received for a development permit with a variance for the property located at Drake Crescent in Prince Rupert. The applicant proposes to construct a total of 11 new townhouse buildings for a total of 42 new dwelling units. This application complies with the multifamily development permit guidelines. The proposed variance is for a front yard setback of 3 meters, which is not anticipated to impact the neighborhood. As this complies with the RM3 zoning, with the exception of the 6-meter front yard setback, this does meet development permit guidelines and is recommended that council approve this application. The building and site plans were included with the application as attachments 1 and 2.
Okay, moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Any comments or questions from council? Councillor Moreau.
Again, maybe this is just something for follow-up, unless you have the answer on the tip of your fingers. I'm curious because I don't recall explicitly dealing with changes to setbacks in the new zoning bylaw. So I'm wondering what, maybe you can refresh my memory on what our rationale was for that change, because I'm reading from the report that basically the new zoning bylaw is the reason that a variance is required, that it wouldn't have required a variance with the old zoning bylaw. And then my only other comment, just on a general basis, is I think reducing the setback, particularly with the commitment to maintain the trees on the Prince Rupert Boulevard side, I really like the way that they've tried to integrate the scale of this development and try to blend it into the existing neighborhood. So I don't have a problem with the variance as it's currently written.
Thank you. With respect to the variance and the setbacks, it was for consistency with the other RM zones, but I can certainly confirm that for you.
Other questions from council? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. It'd be good to see even more housing coming into the community. This seems to be a housing theme tonight. And on to another theme about housing, our housing action workshop. So the recommendation that's council endorse the housing actions listed in Appendix 1, and that council referred the actions to staff to assess resources and capacity and request a follow-up report outlining the resources required for implementing the housing actions as part of the strategic priorities resource reporting, and that council invite comment from local stakeholders and the public on the housing actions. Moved by Councillor Scott Morvan, second by Councillor Niche. Discussion. Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, this is a great start for housing, but what I'm concerned about, and I'd like to see us jump on it as fast as possible, is a renovation bylaw, because New Westminster, Vancouver, and Burnaby have them in place. New Westminster is being tested by the Supreme Court of BC, and so I think it's a simple thing to do. We can get staff to look at that bylaw and bring it in, because we're experiencing a high volume of evictions in town, and you know they're under the guise of renovictions, but in reality it's just because people want to to get into the action with the higher rents and everything. And so I think the first thing we should do with this is bring in a bylaw for rent evictions. That's my, you know, like, I've had 3 people phone me up in the last 2 weeks about, is this legal or that? And we have a fantastic housing advocate in Paul DeGrace at Unemployment Action Society that handles a lot of these cases. And, you know, I've talked to him, and these things are illegal, but they're under the guise of rent evictions. So I think it's something the city can help with.
Absolutely, and I think that's actually probably the ones of them that's going to move forward right away. The only reason why we didn't even do it earlier is because we've been waiting for the Supreme Court decision on whether or not, because that bylaw was challenged in New Westminster, I think between 2 courts. Is that correct? Yeah. And so now I think it was just only about a month or 2 ago that this stayed in the court. So it's legal for municipalities to implement this, and the precedent's now set. So I think our planner is definitely going to be moving forward on that one pretty quick, because that's just writing a bylaw to make sure we get it implemented. Some of these other items in this list here are a little bit more involved. For example, number 1. So I think that's definitely something we need to move forward on. Particularly the policy stuff is stuff that can be done much quicker than, for example, developing land and things like that. So definitely, I think that'll be right away. We'll be moving on that after we approve this today. After talking with the planner, the idea is to get a lot of this work done this summer.
Yeah, there's been comments out there about why we didn't have a housing action plan and things like this. Well, this is a great start. We took our time doing it to get it right, and we want to get it right and only have to do it once. And I think the bylaw is a step in the right direction.
I agree. Other comments from council? Councillor Morrow.
I think Councillor Cunningham read my mind, because that was everything you just said about the renoviction bylaw is what I had in my notes. So I just wanted to add just a bit of context, because you're right, it was the BC Court of Appeal just held up New Westminster's bylaw, and that was just at the start of May. So the only thing I wanted to add that I thought was interesting was basically the court ruled that the renoviction bylaw didn't contradict the Residential Tenancy Act. Obviously, with housing being a provincial jurisdiction, there's a bit of an issue there, and you don't want those 2 things to conflict. You want them to be complementary. So I think New Westminster's bylaw, obviously a lot of municipalities were watching that with a lot of interest. So I think that's something that is worth emulating. The only other thing I would note is that their bylaw, you can not only fine landlords for engaging in these types of actions, you can revoke their business licenses, and you can actually prevent the eviction of entire buildings by requiring landlords to prove to the city that it's necessary for the health, safety, and protection of the residents to do a mass eviction. So I think there's a lot of things we can learn from New Westminster, and I agree with Councillor Cunningham. I know that list isn't in any particular order, but that's I think low-hanging fruit, so to speak, that's worth pursuing.
The main challenge was that the municipality was infringing on a federal provincial jurisdiction, and the Court of Appeal said no, it wasn't. It was well within its right to do it. So, and you know, it went through 3 courts to get to there. So I think we're safe on safe ground to do it.
Other comments? So just looking at this list, I think one of the, through the discussion that we had, this is 15 big moves for this community to enable housing. I think we currently have at least between 200 to 400 units, I believe, are scheduled right now for Rupert that are confirmed housing units that are being developed in the community right now. But the biggest challenge in this community is actually developable land that is prepared. And we all know that muskeg is one of the biggest challenges. One of our councillors definitely knows lots about muskeg. But muskeg and development of land is one of our biggest challenges. And some of the discussion has been about whether or not you give developers tax incentives to do housing, but really they're able to meet their pro formas if they're able to actually develop on flat land. And so number 1 is develop and sell serviced and prepared land for housing development. And this will be a game changer for the community, because if there is a variety of flat developed land that a person can go and build on top of, it's going to grossly accelerate the housing development in this community, which is the number 1 challenge. So council, looking at this housing actions list, sees that as a more appropriate way for us to incentivize housing than doing tax incentives. Where, when you research the literature on tax incentives, having it to a specific area to, for example, like what we've done with the downtown, it's more effective when it's in one specific area to incentivize the development of that area. But for us to have broad scale housing all over the community, our strategy has been through the OCP is densification of the downtown. We know that through what's available in the downtown right now, we could probably fit about 1,000 new residents in the downtown comfortably. And then there's the greenfields and outside of the community and the outskirts, which are a lot of empty land that have no development to it. So the city, we own a whole bunch of property around the community. So part of this action plan will be, and what we approved today is to have staff look into the costs and timelines of how this would all look throughout the time. But in the meantime, as Councillor Cunningham's suggesting, a lot of the policy work that we can put together is, can happen much more quickly. One of the ones that I like particularly is waiving the fees for rezoning, development permits, building permits. These are just small acts of us saying, look, we're getting rid of the red tape. If you have a project for housing, we're going to make sure that you're accelerated, that you're prioritized, and you're at the top of the list, and we're going to get you done as fast as possible. We know that housing is one of the main challenges to the entire redesign revision. You can't build that vision unless you have people moving here to come and work, and people in the community who are already displaced looking for rentals that can't find anywhere. And I think these are the types of actions that are appropriate for us to take as a municipality to fully accelerate the housing development environment in the community. And I think it's going to be successful, and we're starting to success already without even having these in place. But we have more to do, and we're definitely making sure that we're part of the solution on this.
Okay, there's, like this, I'd love to see this get out to the landlords, because there's things in here, change the utility billing to remove extra cost for secondary suites. Right now, we have an underground of secondary suites where people don't want to put it out there because of the utility bill doubling and things like this, when you only have one sewer and one water going into the place and things like this. So there's definite perks here for landlords to, waiving the fees, as you just said, and a lot of other stuff. And the other thing is, lobby the provincial and federal governments to make them tax exempt, so that you're actually, there's a benefit to, one, helping the housing market, and two, helping yourself. So and if municipalities through UBCM and FCM lobby the federal government, I think it's a big win for the landlords to be able to have a secondary suite and not have to declare that as income, it's beneficial to everyone. So I really think we've got some real good ideas in here, and I'd like to see them get out to the public so they understand it's not just attacking one area and taking something away and things like this, but actually giving a lot back to the community through this housing action plan.
Absolutely. I think the utility piece in particular, it's been being double fined or double billed for utilities on a property when they're all using the same lines has been something that has been, for a lot of homeowners, it's almost like a double tax on them. So us removing that, I think, is an important gesture for us to make sure that we can enable that secondary suite environment in the community. Because maybe Councilor Moreau has the numbers, but I can't remember what we thought about how many secondary suites could be available with blanketing across the community. I remember you mentioned it one time. Do you remember the numbers? Yeah, okay. Well, it's a significant amount of secondary suites would be enabled in this community, and then those homeowners are not being charged double utility bills. So we'll make sure that this list, gets out there in the community, and then when we get the report back through the summertime on which priorities we'll take action on first, either way, I think these are pretty bold, big moves. Councillor Niche.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. Developing land for developers to build new housing on is definitely important. But in the short term, by allowing people to build secondary suites or to, like you say, dropping whether we completely eliminate or reduce that second cost so it's not the same amount as the first cost as far as water bill and water, sewer, garbage. We'll have to look at, if we all of a sudden eliminated every second suite, obviously that's going to impact the what we collect, which would mean the everyone else's rate would go up too. So there's obviously going to be a balance there that has to be struck. But I think that in the short term, if we can encourage as much, building in current situations, like, fixing houses that are already there, adding extra suites, and doing what we can do to get people coming here, and then from there start working on these land developments where we can start building more and more and more housing. And I think we're on the right path. It's just unfortunately nothing seems to go as fast as we like, but I think we're heading in the right direction, and I look forward to hearing what people have to say about all of these actions.
Other comments? Okay, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Looking forward to hearing back from staff on some of the progress later this summer. Okay, next up, item E. We have a notice of motion from Councillor Murrow. So the notice of motion by Councillor Murrow, whereas councillors strive to be ethical, transparent, and accountable, and act honestly and in good faith, and conduct ourselves with integrity, and that a code of conduct can be shared expectations for the way in which elected officials should conduct themselves while carrying out their responsibilities as a collective decision-making body. Now therefore be it resolved that the CAO review council code of conduct options and policies adopted in other municipalities and report back to council for consideration. Would you like to speak to that? Or does
Sure.
anybody want to move that?
I could move it to
you
start the
move it?
discussion. Yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Scott Morgan. Discussion.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I think the motion, I think, is written in a way that's fairly self-explanatory. So I think what I want to just focus my comments on is why I'm moving this motion, but also why I'm moving it now. So the answer to the question of why I think a code of conduct is an important step for us to take is, I think we want to do more than the bare legislative minimum expectations. The community charter is quite broad and quite vague, and not very prescriptive when it comes to a lot of I think the most common issues that we've seen being experienced in other municipalities, which I would say we've largely been spared from, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn from other people's mistakes and try to be proactive to avoid, or at least provide a solid framework for us to work within. So a code of conduct can deal with anything from lobbying to interactions with developers, contractors, tenders, proponents, consultants, communicating on behalf of the city, protecting confidentiality, avoiding conflict of interest, improper use of influence, use of city property, all these kind of types of things that could potentially get elected officials in hot water if they're not paying attention. And a council code of conduct also have provisions for a complaint process, compliance, enforcement, and penalties and sanctions in the worst case of scenarios. Some municipalities have gone as far as setting expectations around stuff like social media, where there's been issues where we're legally obligated to keep an open mind before a public hearing, for example, and you could make statements that could be construed as being for or against the project before you're legally required. Some have gone as far as trying to reduce incumbency advantage in election cycles. So, for example, not using your civic email address for election activities. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. Or not participating in kind of civic events after the campaign nomination period is closed. There's a number of different models and a number of different degrees to which municipalities have gone. So I think it's a worthwhile pursuit to ask our city manager to come back to us with a number of different options that are available to us. So that's the question of why. I think the question of why now is these are relatively new, generally speaking, to British Columbia. The first council code of conduct was adopted in 2018, but our neighbors in Alberta were recently required across the entire province to adopt a code of conduct. In April, the UBCM had a working group on responsible conduct, so they've updated their manual or their model. And Councillor Cunningham had asked for that in advance. I'm happy to send that to anyone else if you'd want to take a read. And I think what's also important to note of why now is we've recently undertaken quite a lot of initiatives. The new official community plan, new zoning bylaw, downtown tax revitalization exemption, all these types of things that are meant to encourage private development. And we've seen with this hot housing market and continued port-related growth that it means there's going to be a lot more private development interest coming across our table. That's just inevitable. And we can't deny that private interests can derive private benefit through public policy, through through lobbying elected decision makers. I don't know how else to say that. So the last piece that I would say is, I think just given where we are in our term, I think it's prudent for us to start now to think beyond ourselves as a council. So not only do we want to set a framework and set expectations that set us up to avoid these pitfalls that other municipalities have experienced, but also set a firm foundation for that next council. Because I know where we are today compared to 7 years ago, orientation is going to look a lot longer for the next council than it did for us. There's just so many moving pieces, so many different things to learn. And so maybe what I'll end with is, because this motion is just asking our city manager to report back, I should be explicit. I did have a lengthy conversation with him about this, so it's not a blindside by any means. He is in the loop and generally supportive of getting us a report. So that's the rationale for my motion.
Councillor Eady.
Yeah, I support the initiative. I'm interested in what comes back if we choose to go this route in terms of options. And of course, at that point, you have to have a vibrant discussion about whether you're willing to take that step into initiating something like that. And you know, depending on what we're looking at, I don't know what kind of nuances that discussion might have to it. But I think in principle, it's really important. And I know just the experience of the last couple of years, seeing the pace of change begin to accelerate, and I think we're just at the beginning of that, and how that impacts neighborhoods, and how easy it is if you've lived in a community for a long time to know the players involved in development on a number of levels. It can get really awkward and really complex, trying to put your various hats in the appropriately separated chambers. And I think anything that we can bring that will be a kind of a blueprint for how best to manage that, so that things can move forward seamlessly, so that things are done properly, so that people don't fall into traps that they shouldn't or don't have to fall into, would be a good thing. So I'm in support of the initiative.
Other comments? Councillor Cunningham.
I agree with both councillors here that I support the issue, but at the same time, it being the middle of the summer, the end of a pandemic coming, the extra load on our city manager when she's now doing dual jobs and that, I think the timing is a little off. I'd like to give her more time, as much time as she needs for this, because I just think right now our staff is, as we've discussed in other meetings, are flat out with a lot of things. And this is just adding another feather to the load sort of thing. But I support it. Right now I don't think we have a problem, but there could be a problem in the future or with a future council. And so I've got no problem supporting it. I just don't want to put any time restraints on our city manager to come up with this report right now. And if that's acceptable, it's just what I'm thinking. I just think that right now there's a lot on their plate, and to say they're going to have a time restraint to get this done in the next meeting or something like that, I'd rather they can work on it and get it done and not have any pressure to do it.
Councillor, anybody else? Councillor Morrow?
So I should clarify. I don't think I've put a deadline for reporting back. No. So I mean, that was the reason I had the conversation with the city manager in advance, because I didn't want to be overburdening anyone. But my only response in regard to the timing is, if we're not going to do it now, then when are we going to do it? I mean, I think we're at a point here where this is, I would argue it's got a little bit more teeth than a feather. And I think it's important that we set ourselves up and again, beyond ourselves, the next council set them up for success. So I don't think we're asking a lot for a report back based on best practices that have existed now for a couple of years. So I'm not asking him to reinvent the wheel. I'm just hoping that we can get a report on best practices from what's already been done elsewhere. So yeah, I don't see the timing as the issue, and the city manager didn't voice any of those concerns to me in our conversation. Although I shouldn't speak for him because he's not in the room.
I think that's good timing. I mean, I've been, over the last 7.5 years, I did many workshops through UBCM and even at the FCM with this discussion, and one of the challenges with any council is there's no way to manage when issues arise on a council. I mean, I'm not worried about this council in particular either. I think we work really well together and people generally follow the rules, but there are many councils where there is a Wild West situation where councillors, whether they have fiduciary interests in property or whatever it is, it's very difficult for a councillor to be held accountable in the current framework of the community charter. In fact, many times if there's a dysfunction on a council, most of the time those councils actually have to hire some sort of consultant to come in and do a review and whether or not conduct is or is not being conducted appropriately. And you know, we're fortunate that we actually operate like a team and we're not like that as a council, because other councils, you know, you can have clear divisions on those councils and then people, those communities are not at service when those councils operate like that. So I think clarity and ultimately, you know, some of my colleagues were involved with the designing of the UBCM recommendations. So those recommendations are easy to follow. I mean, that's a working group of many municipalities. I think it's just setting a standard, and I think what Councillor Moreau is getting at is that, you know, we're setting an expectation now for the next generation of this community with redesign and all the initiatives that we want to do with this community. And I think as a council who's going to be going through major growth over the next 10 years, those councils should have a framework of how they operate with each other and what those rules are. And there's clarity to how that conduct is, because you know, I've talked to lots of councillors over 7 years and mayors who don't fully understand when they shouldn't be involved in certain conversations or what it, you know, and it's not always apparent. I mean, there is the LGLA, which is the Local Government Leadership Academy, and they conduct workshops for councils who are new each term at the beginning of each, and they have ongoing trainings, and they have a certificate program actually for councillors who want to take leadership, and they get this type of training on these types of actions. But ultimately cities themselves don't have their own codes of conducts that really spell it out. And I think it is good for us, as you know, as we're waning on this term, you know, that the next council that comes after us, that they have that clarity. And you know, I think it's done when it's done. You know, whenever that report comes back, it comes back. I don't know how urgent it is, but at the end of the day, I think it's something we need to move forward on. So I definitely support the motion, and we'll see what those recommendations are. Ultimately, UBCM has come up with a really good outline on what the code of conduct would look like. So I don't know if it would be too much extra effort to put examples from other municipalities, their codes of conduct, that recommendation document, and see if there's something unique to Rupert that we can create for ourselves that just holds us to a standard that we all want to operate in. Other comments? Any final thoughts?
I would just end with a couple of cliches.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You plan for the worst so that it doesn't happen, and prior planning prevents poor performance. I was raised on cliches, so that's the values that I'm bringing to the table.
Okay. Well, on that note, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, Councilor Moreau. Okay, next up we have another report regarding the official community plan amendment bylaw 3472/2021 and rezoning application ZBLA 2102 for the property legally described as Lot 2, District Lot 1992, Range 5, Coast District Plan 7225. Oh, I did. 5F. I forgot to put it on my agenda. Sorry, 5F is actually a letter of support recommendation. So the North Coast Immigrant and Multicultural Services Society is asking for a letter of support from council to apply for the Reaching Home grant at Prax so that they can do more work with seniors and people with disability and things like that in our community. So they're applying for funds from Prax. So they're looking for a letter of support for us to administer some programs. So moved by Councillor Moreau, second by Councillor Ranhawa. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you for that, Councilor Morrow. And I said my first bit for 6A. So the recommendations that council give first and second reading to the City of Prince Rupert Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 3472/2021 and City of Prince Rupert Zoning Bylaw number 3462/2021, Amendment Bylaw number 3473/2021, and that council require a Section 219 covenant prior to adoption to restrict the use of the C2 lands to a traveler's accommodation use only and to limit rental units to a maximum of 60 suites, and that council proceed to public hearing for amendment bylaw number 3472/2021 and amendment bylaw number 3473/2021.
I'd like to recuse myself. This property is right in my backyard.
'Kay.
So I'll be in conflict, so I'll be recusing myself.
Good to know. Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Okay, discussion. Councillor 80.
Yeah, and looking through, we've kind of seen the bones of this proposal over a number of different occasions. And I think some things have certainly moved forward with respect to it. I'm particularly struck by the number of public support pieces that they were able to put in place. I do see under referrals several statements, but the one that drew my attention is the fire department advised there may be access issues for fire vehicles and apparatus on the site due to the narrow aisles. So I guess my question around that is, well, first of all, a position. I think that there needs to be no concerns from the fire department with respect to the building. And I think the project needs to get to where that's the case. My question is, where in the kind of recommendation for how we proceed would we see that piece taken care of?
Thank you. So with respect to what's proposed tonight, it's simply just the first and second reading. So there will be a further opportunity for the fire department to provide input and information for council to consider. And I can certainly ask the deputy fire chief to provide his rationale for the reasons.
And potentially any amendments that the proponent might need to make if they can't be resolved. Because then before the public hearing, it would be good to be able to have that information either presented at the public hearing or elsewhere. And just a note, so this project is, I think, probably it's the first rezoning that's in our new development guidelines, which we have mandated to have all the public engagement up front. So it's rare for us to see letters of support and engagement at a first presentation. And the reason why we did that is because most of the time we have rezonings, it takes almost months for the community to have a chance to have a say, which allows speculation in the community to occur. So in this case, it's up to the developer to go and actually reach out to the community and present their project to the community, just as they did tonight. That was a presentation for the community, plus engagement with the community, so that there's the ability for the community to know what's being proposed before council even gets to first reading. Before, we would do first and second, we would do maybe an info session. Sometimes that could take 3 months. People question what's happening, there's no information, there's always that type of process. So this is the first development that's actually going through that process. So you can see already 30 plus letters of support. That's probably the first time I've seen that happen for a project in anything. So obviously they're doing their due diligence. But ultimately we'll hear at a public hearing what folks have to say. Maybe Ms. Miller, if you could explain the Section 219. And is C2 lands a typo, or is it supposed to be C3?
Thank you. I will need to confirm with Mr. Buchan, who created this report. It should likely say C3.
Okay.
I will note, with respect to the letters of support that came, there was one letter in the negative that was directed to City Hall, so we do have that in our files, and that will be included as part of the package that is provided for the public hearing. With respect to the Section 219 covenant, so if council decides to approve this application, the Section 219 covenant is recommended to restrict the use of the lands to travelers' accommodation only. So the applicant has been advised that they're committed to this proposal, but the Section 219 covenant prevents any deviation from the proposal provided.
Right, so we've done this in the past. This is to basically ensure that the proponent's going to do what they're going to do and they don't get a rezoning and then change their development proposal and do something different.
Correct, and it is my understanding that the applicant is in favor of the 219 covenant.
Great. Councillor Moreau.
That's great. That preemptively answered my question. And I just want to echo what you said there, Mr. Mayor, is that you guys have heard me say a couple of times that I think process is equally as important as product, and this is one of those examples where I don't think we've seen a project at first reading have that much input. So I love to see from what I read in that report, the applicant was actually out hand delivering the notifications, which is fantastic. So I want to commend them for that. And I think other developers would do well to take note of that approach in the future. And so considering that this is now the first rezoning, as you mentioned, since our new official community plan zoning bylaw, I thought it was important to address, I think what we had this conversation at the public hearing of the OCP, was that, our intent was to cluster commercial development closer to Cow Bay. And, there was some suggestion that rezoning this back to commercial or letting it remain commercial was contrary to that objective. But one thing I want to draw attention to here in first and second reading is if you look what's all the different uses allowed under C3, you've got retail, cannabis, personal service, office, childcare, campsite, theater, assembly hall, service commercial, and service station. Some of those things I think are quite clearly and obviously an antithesis to Vision 2030, the Midtown District, clustering commercial development. But not everything there runs contrary to that objective. And so the covenant question I think was an important one because that strikes a really great balance on land use as well as size, because by restricting the land use for the purposes of temporary accommodation, you're not now opening up the door for retail development, which as I think, if I understand everyone's main objective correctly, that was really our main focus, was retail, service commercial, to try to cluster that. So I think the covenant does strike a good balance. But with that said, I am really interested in the feedback that the community will give at the public hearing on this one. Because if we had proceeded, or sorry, I should say, if we had delayed the OCP, then the community wouldn't have had an opportunity to put in their input. So I think that covenant strikes a good balance, and I'm happy that we're going to be bringing that forward to the community, and I'm looking forward to moving this to public hearing.
Other comments? Councillor Nish.
Yeah, I'll just add to that those comments. I mean, as it was pointed out in the presentation to us earlier, we did make a move to change this zoning, but I do believe that it was just a matter of unfortunate timing for these proponents, and I think that this council is open to hear. Even though it's kind of funny that here we are after just approving our official community plan, we are doing an amendment to it. But I think that was the right move. I think we moved our plan forward, and just like Councilor Moreau had said, there's a lot of uses in C3, and now what we've done is we've kind of shifted it towards, even though it was RM2 on the official community plan, this is kind of following housing in a sense, because this is something that supplies our community with potentially an option to supply more of a short-term housing, I guess, for maybe people that are coming for shorter stints, whether it's a week or a month or 3 months. So it is kind of, it's not RM2, but it is not, as you were saying, the other uses that would be typical to commercial zoning, which we are trying to cluster in our downtown. So I look forward to hearing what people have to say, and obviously by the work that the proponent has done already, they have a lot of support. So I will keep an open mind until the day that it has to happen, and we will see what everyone has to say.
Other comments? Okay, we will hear what the public has to say at the public hearing. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Call Councilor Randhawa back in. Okay, item 6B is a report from the corporate administrator regarding the recreation fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3472/2021.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this bylaw is intended to update and bring current the existing fees and charges in recreation, which will include amending family admission rates, a general increase of 5%, which is standard across the board to align with costs. We have added, or the staff have added, an event damage and security deposit into the bylaw, which is not currently there. As well, we've amended field rentals to better reflect maintenance costs.
Okay, comments from council.
You know, I think we had some pretty long discussions about this last time. This was 5 years ago when we upped the rates, and the previous councils had spent you know, I think it was about 10 years where there was no rate increases at the recreation center, and you know, their reasoning was to keep costs low for the community because of, you know, economic factors of the time. And you know, there was a little bit of opposition to increasing those rates, but you know, as a frequent well, my kid's more of a frequent user of the facility than myself, and spending time in the facility, and you can see, you know, we did increase it, and it hasn't decreased the usage of the facility, but it's also added a lot of needed work to the facility by adding that small incremental amount every year. It has, you know, we've increased the, you know, new lighting in there. We've redone the floors in there, and we're improving the facility. And if you stay on that track of not increasing, you know, the costs to use the facility, you know, nothing's going to get fixed and the place is going to fall apart. So by slowly, you know, increasing the fees and charges, it doesn't put us in a position like last time where you don't do nothing for 10 years and then all of a sudden you got to do a big increase, and you know, and then you're trying to catch up with 10 years worth of neglect. So as much as we all hate to see costs go up, the reality is that all of our costs for that facility are rising, and we do put in, I believe, about $2 million additional a year beyond what we collect in fees and charges. So any small amount that we can collect will help improve the facility, and I'm hoping that you know, with COVID restrictions getting lifted here soon, that we're going to get that facility back up and running and at full tilt again, and you know, the improvements will only continue. So I'm in support of this.
Are you moving it then?
I will move it.
Any seconders? Councilor Adie? Okay, further discussions. Councilor Randhawa, Moreau, then Cunningham. Oh, you're pointing. Okay, Councilor Randhawa, then Councilor Cunningham.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So, like last time, so people still, like with COVID, lots of people don't have jobs, and people on fixed income. Like I can see, like youth, the one who is paying $349 today, in by 2026 he be paying $445, and adult $540 today, $689, almost $7 for 3 hours use. So people with, like, especially with the fixed income, that will be like an increase, even $1 increase be hard for them. So, and I can see, like, maybe we can lose some members, like, to use that facility, even with a little increase. So I rather like to see keep charges affordable, so we can have more members can choose instead of more money, more fees, and less people choose. So I'm not in favor of this motion, and I think we should keep affordable pricing for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because the challenge is if we don't do this, then we're looking at tax increases to offset the costs, right?
Yeah.
So it's fees and charges versus tax increases, but also maybe Miss Miller, you can outline the recreation access program, right? We still have a program for low-income families, vulnerable families to access. Well, how much funds is that available for those folks? And what's the program, if you can maybe outline it?
Thank you. So my suggestion would be to contact the Recreation Department. We very much separate ourselves from the process there just to ensure complete anonymity for people applying. If you contact the rec center, they'll send you the information and the questionnaire, and it's a very discreet process. At no point in time, is my understanding, is anyone turned away from using the rec complex due to financial means. With respect to the charges, the adult fee, which was used as an example, is goes up less than 25 cents per year, albeit over the course of 6 years it is $1.50. It's 25 cents over each year. But there are programs in place for not just with respect to the Recreation Access Program, but also through the different associations and organizations that use the facility. So Prince Rupert Minor Hockey, et cetera, do have programs in place to facilitate for any financial impact.
Right, because I remember that was a big discussion of last time that we had, was folks who have, that we basically guarantee anyone who does apply gets accepted through a discreet anonymous program where their family and their children get access to the recreation center. I think what's the subsidy that we give right now? It's like, I think we're 2.2 million, is it around there? And what does that account for? 75% of the, so we subsidize 75% of the rec center, 25% is offset by fees. So essentially this is just to make sure that these 25-cent increases are to keep up with the inflation essentially of operating the building. Is that and the complex?
Correct. And to be fair, the 25 cents or the 24 cents is adults, but children might be 10 cents or 14 cents. It really depends.
Right. So I think before I go into Councillor Cunningham, I think the biggest message is, because I remember this from last time, is letting the community know that if you're in a position where it feels like there's a barrier to going in the rec complex, we have a program in place for families to apply to be able to get a pass to the rec center, and we have funds available where we set aside funds for that program. I mean, personally, I'm not saying I'm in favor of raising anything. I hate having to raise anything, but in this circumstance, we got to keep up with the maintenance costs of this building and of this program, and we already subsidize it by $2.2 million, which is a 22% of worth of taxes for that whole complex. So I think we're doing our part by making sure the fees actually remain low. And so I see a balance we have to strike, and this is a balance that I think is appropriate. Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, again, I don't like seeing fees go up, especially for the youth and that, but because the vulnerable families can't afford it. Most people can afford it, especially if their kids are in programs like ice or hockey or swim and things like that. The programs are there for people that can't afford it. The one that falls through the cracks is the drop-in for youth. And last time we had a problem with that because kids were coming down, sitting out in the lobby or places like that, and not going in and playing drop-in basketball or things like this, which was a big thing in this town. We had a recreational director at the time that would actually walk the hallways and ask kids why they were out there, and, oh, well, I don't have the $2 or whatever, so, they've got a pair of sneakers and that's it. So, she would say, well, get in there and play. And that doesn't fall into every kid gets to play or the programs or that. And as long as somebody is there to watch that one particular, the drop-ins like that, because these are kids that are just coming down there because they've got no place else to go, and they're doing that drop-in. And when they don't have that, they're out in the street or doing something else. And that's the one aspect of the every kid gets to play where people fall through the cracks, because that kid isn't going to say, well, I can't afford it and go to the office. One, the office isn't usually open at night when they're down there, and two, the kid's not going to do it. And so that's one aspect of any fees that we've got to watch. because those are the kids that we've got to get to and get them involved. They're the ones that are vulnerable and need the help more than anything else. And so how we address that, I don't know. That program helps big time. I've watched it, I've been involved in it and I've helped people donate money to it. And it's an ongoing program. But the fact is, there's the one group of kids that come, they wander down there after school or after dinner, and they can't go in because they don't have the $2.35 in that. And the director at the time was just saying, get in there and play with your friends. And they were happy. And it wasn't abused, and she knew which kids needed the help and which didn't. Now, how we address that, I don't know, but it's something we have to address.
Do we have what's the process for that right now?
Yes, we do. Our staff are very proactive in watching who's coming into the facility. If they need to just go in, they're very discreet and proactive to ensure that every child who comes into that facility does get to use it. We also do have the youth lounge, which we opened and then COVID shut it down, so I think it maybe was used for 2 days. But we do have a youth lounge there as well that is free for kids to go in. There's various games. I think there's a pool table. There was various things that they could do in there as well. So certainly our staff do make every effort, and they're not going to have someone sit on the bench, excuse me, while all their friends go and play. They will ensure that they get in there and they go play, and they're very good about it.
Now we also have an after-school program now, don't we? Down there?
That is coming in. Many of our programs you'll see after COVID's over, as someone has told me today, that will start back up, including after-school programs starting in September.
Great. So the biggest message is, whether you're dropping in and you want to play basketball or you can't afford to use a rec center or whatever it is, we will make sure you can go use that and it won't be a barrier to you. That's the primary message we need to let the community know of. Otherwise, these rates just keep the place operational so we can make improvements to HVAC systems and all kinds of things that we need to do, whether it's installing LED lightings to try to save costs, whatever it may be. Unfortunately, you just have to there's costs associated with running it. So, but we will never leave any child behind when it comes to using the facility or any families that want to use it. Councillor Niche.
And just to point out too, that our rates are actually still low in comparison to other facilities in the north too. So because of that big long stretch of rates basically frozen for years and years and years, it put us way further behind than other communities. Other communities did the small incremental increases over time, and they were probably better off by doing that. By doing that, they managed to maintain their facilities, and it wasn't such a shock at the end of the day. So, you look at it from the perspective of one way or another, taxpayers, if they have to pay more of an increase because we're not slowly increasing the costs and the revenues, then the taxpayer is essentially going to have to put more money into the facility too. So one way or another, someone's got to pay for it. And the users that use it are the people that should pay for it also. So, I mean, I think we all have to pay for it, but, I think I love the fact that the facility has improved so much over the last couple of years, and that is because we raised the fees last time, and that's because we were able to afford to do the things that we needed to do, like you were mentioning. I mean, we just put a new boiler in there. There's been many increases in there, and I think that like I said, I mean, it's unfortunate. Nobody wants to see things go up, and I think we've tried to hold a pretty good balance at keeping taxes down and trying not to increase things as much as other communities have to, but the reality is that our costs are going up too, and when our costs go up, that means someone's got to pay for it. So I still say I support this.
Any further comments, Councillor Renthow?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was wondering, if someone has a comparison with our same level community, our neighbors, how much they're charging, and also 5 years ago, how many numbers we had that time people using, and how many people using now. So if somebody can have any kind of comparison from there. So I understand like your position, like we need funds to operate, but like instead of like $7, right? Like $6.89, right? So like right now they're paying $5.40. So like instead of maybe if we even lose one person, right? Like not everybody will go. So if somebody don't have money, like extra couple bucks or extra buck, they probably won't go there, right? So instead of like two people, if we lose one, we may make only $7, but if we are two people, we make $10. So I just want like keep the price low, bring more people out, and revenue. I understand we need revenue that.
I mean, just to respond to that, I mean, you know, like Miss Miller was saying, you know, the small increases can be like 10 cents or you know, so I think there was one in there for swimming that was like 5 cent increase, or no, 15 cent increase. So, you know, you're saying on one hand that, you know, that extra cost will deter someone from going, but if you wait 5 years, don't do any increases, and in 5 years you say to them it's going to cost you $1 more, versus saying to them now it's going to cost you 15 cents more, you know, and next year, you know, 15 cents more, that to me, that logic means that things get maintained, plus it's not such a hard hit for someone because it is such small increases versus doing it all at one time. Because if we don't do it at the end of 5 years, we're going to be told, you know, I mean, it might not even be us because it could be a different council, who knows. But in 5 years from now, when the council that's sitting in these chairs looks at it and they say, well, why didn't these guys raise the fees? Now we have to increase it by 10% a year to try and catch up from the previous 5 years. And that's the only argument I have against what you're saying. Because, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but there is programs in place for people that are vulnerable, people that can't afford things. Those programs are there, and you know, we will help them get to those programs if they can't afford it. And you know, our staff is going to make sure that people are still able to use that facility. And at the end of the day, small increases makes more sense than big increases every 5 years, because that's where people will all of a sudden, you know, if it went up 25% in one bang, then people are not going to appreciate that as much. So
Yeah, I mean, the financial forecasts have been set by the staff. If we don't do anything now, then 5 years from now, the council's raising taxes to offset the load. So one or the other, unfortunately.
I
It's
don't
our
know.
challenge we've always faced on this council,
Yeah,
right?
I'm not sure. Sorry if I can explain. I just want to like keep price low, bring more people in.
You're trying to
and
say that if you keep it low, you'll have
yeah,
more people, so
more
they'll
people.
keep the
That's-
cost. But
I'm
we
not
can't.
saying like we
yeah.
should not do anything.
I hear you.
Yeah, I just want to say like keep a price
The
low.
problem
so
is we
more
can't
people
predict
Yeah.
if that's going to increase
So-
or
so-
less
So that's
usage, right?
my.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Councilor Eady.
I'm assuming that the rec center management is the same as some of the other institutions. I know the library, for example, keeps a pretty detailed, itemized tracking of patrons, how many they're getting in a given month, how many books are going out, you know, what's being rented, and so on. And I'm assuming the same is true for the rec center. So with that assumption in place, I think that what would happen is that over time those numbers would tell the story for us. And if there was a clear impact on the number of users, at that point the management of the rec center would say, okay, well, this is having this impact, what's the next step? So I guess I would prefer, it's an issue that appeals to both sides of my nature. I'm very interested in supporting particularly kids and their access to these facilities, but I also understand that things cost money and we have to take care of that side of it too. So I guess what I would suggest is that the middle ground might be to ensure that as these fees go into place, that there is some tracking of the impact that it has. And if after the first year or the second year there's clearly an impact, then we'll need to take a different tack.
I think we actually, do you have those figures, or do you have a, because we had this discussion, the exact same discussion last time, remember? It's almost identical. But, I mean, the usage continues to climb, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So we're actually have increased demand, except for COVID, obviously. But we know that even at the last time we did this, and we have the figures, those are all tracked. The Recreation Commission actually gets those numbers updated to them, which I believe we have 3 of our council members. Which one? It's you. Oh, Councilor. Okay, so the 3 of you guys are on there. So you guys are seeing those numbers at the Recreation Commission. So it's clear that demand's not going anywhere, and that we have those demands, and these recommendations were being made is based on that data as well, right? We have upkeep, we have more demand, which means more costs. So, I mean, I'm prepared to make a decision. I don't know if there's more discussion needed to be had. Go ahead.
I'm just going to add one piece, because I don't know if we've explicitly said it this way, but I mean, I think where we all agree with Councillor Randhawa is that we want to increase users. That's our end goal. And you know, if these fee increases were just covering the cost of inflation, then I would come to the same conclusion as you, that yeah, okay, we are quite literally nickel and diming people to get the same level or less service as inflation increases. But these increases that staff are recommending, it goes beyond inflation. It goes into improvement of the facilities and improvement of services and expansion of services. So I think also some of those investments, I think Councillor Niche mentioned the new boiler system. So some of these investments are going into cost savings, which when we can plow operational cost savings then into enhancing programs and enhancing the facilities. So I think the best way for us to increase users is not just to maintain inflation, but to continue improving these facilities so that more people will want to access them. Because I think we all understand we've inherited a facility that's, you know, decades old. It's showing its age. It's going to need a little bit more dollars than a new facility might. So I think we all agree with you, Councillor Randauer. We definitely want to increase users. I think we've come to the opposite conclusions on how to do that.
Yeah.
Councillor Cunningham.
5 years ago, we had the same discussion, and it boiled down to, if you don't put up fees and you don't want to increase taxes, it's quite simple. You cut services. And you start cutting services, and it doesn't matter how many people are using it. The service isn't there for them to use. And I recall last time we had this same discussion. We didn't want to put up taxes. We didn't want to put up fees. In the end, we put up the fees and didn't put up taxes. So it was a win. And if we do this again, you know, like I just checked with Terrace's prices. They're pretty close to where we are. You know, like it's not that far out. But the bottom line is, as long as there's programs to help kids, I've got no problem supporting increases. Because sooner or later, if we don't put up the fees and we don't increase taxes, guess what? They're closing the door 1 or 2 days a week because you can't afford to keep the place open. You know yourself, when you have a house, if you don't earn enough money to keep the lights on or keep the place heated, something happens. And it's the same with us. You know, like, and as long as we have programs where these kids can use the program and still use the facility that are vulnerable, I have no problem with it, because they're the ones. Everyone in this room can afford to send their kids to the Civic Center. There's people out in that street that can't. And they're the ones that we have to look out for. They're the ones we have to make sure there's programs in place to take care of them. That's our job here. But at the same time, our job is to keep the place open. And if it's not to increase user fees, then it's to increase taxes. And you know, taxi fares go up. Why? Because the expenses to run a taxi go up. So yeah, it's just, you know, the law of mathematics and economics. Things have to go up. Whether we like it or not, they have to. And, you know, it's that simple. If we don't put up the fees, then we've got to put up taxes, and everyone pays. You know, some people might like that, some people might not. You know, some people never go to the rec center. Why should I have to pay more? And, you know, so we have a user fee system that isn't really fair to a lot of people that don't use it, but it's fair to a lot of other people. And it's just the economics of it. You know, this town went through where we were cutting services, and, you know, and lanes were shut down because they didn't have the staff or the equipment to keep them open, and a lot of other things. And you drive down the streets, and we're playing catch up now with our infrastructure and that. Why? Because it wasn't taken care of, because the money wasn't there. And now we've got some money, and we've got to be careful how we spend it, but at the same time, we've got to look after everyone. And I think by having the programs that make sure people get to use the facility, and we have staff that monitor people that are sitting there that might not be able to use it, I'm fine with it, because the increases, like Councillor Neese says, are minimal. And so, no one has a problem paying the extra whatever it is for a taxi fare or a bus fare to get where they're going. And so, if you want to get to the other end of the gym, you've got to pay to go. It's user fee.
Okay.
Yeah, like I agree with whatever Councillor Cunningham said, but I could be wrong. But I feel like by this increase we can lose some members. So if we keep affordable pricing, we can bring more people and the revenue be more. So I still stick with my decision.
No problem. Okay, I'm sensing the end of the discussion, so we'll do a question, okay? So, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you for the discussion. Okay, we'll move on to the reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Councilor 80.
I appreciate the levity that this inspires, but I'm sure it's a very serious issue in its own way. But just in the last week, we've had media stories taking up the idea that there may have been mistakes around the ownership of waterfront property, whereby some of the land that was understood to be owned by CN may be owned by the city land. So rather than have a debate about who owns the land, because at this point I think we've still got some avenues we have to go down. I'd just ask for an update. My understanding was that staff was looking into that story and trying to firm up our understanding of what's involved there. I'm just wondering where we are at with that process.
That is correct. Staff, once we became aware of the information, we are researching to confirm the status of the land, and we will provide an update as soon as we have some more information.
Thank you. Other Councilor Cunningham.
Real quick one. We're always after people to clean up their properties and everything like that. And, people are always complaining about this or that. Well, I'd like to compliment one business owner in town here. I was walking down 2nd Avenue, and I noticed that Teresa Lee, that owns the Moby Dick, as well as 2 other hotels in town. And 2 of her 3 properties, I've noticed she's doing a lot of work, planting flowers, things like this. And, we had Goat Gate there last year, but, at the same time, I just like to point out that there are people in town that take a lot of pride in their property, and Teresa Lee is one of them with the Totem Lodge and the Moby Dick and the Parkside. And she's, just planting flowers along the side of the street, enhances that property and that. So I just like to other people to note that and say, hey, look what she's doing. Maybe we can just spend $20 and buy some flowers.
Other Councilor Neese, how do you feel about the flowers? Other comments or questions or inquiries from members of council? Okay, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Renhouse, second by Councilor 80. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned.